When fighting monsters, you yourself do not become a monster, because when you gaze long into the abyss also gazes into you. This quote belongs to the German philosopher Friedrich Nietzsche, and in my opinion, it describes Billy Butcher's character perfectly. Because throughout his whole life, Butcher has been looking into that dark, endless void. And in his fight against this darkness, he became exactly what Nietzsche warned about, a monster himself. Along the way, he hurt countless people, killed and manipulated. And in the end, he turned into someone bitter, someone who doesn't care about what's right or wrong. Billy Butcher is not a hero, that's for sure. He's a ruthless killer who would manipulate anyone to get his revenge. But if you take a closer look, what you'll see is not just a ruthless man seeking vengeance, but also the tragedy of a man trapped in a never-ending cycle of violence. I mean, sure, Butcher has been through hell to get where he's today, but at first it was hard to see the tragedy behind his actions. Because right from the start, the show portrays him as this classic badass anti-hero. With his charisma and fierce determination to fight the Supes, he quickly wins the audience. Even though we witness his morally ambiguous and often downright brutal actions, we can't help but root for him, because the enemies he's fighting are so much worse. The next thing we learn is that Butcher's wife Becca was raped and allegedly murdered by Homelander, who just got away with it. And this revelation makes us even more eager to see Butcher get his revenge. But at the same time, all those terrible deeds Butcher did along the way make us ask this question. When fighting monsters, is it inevitable to become one of them? Because let's be honest, Butcher's way of dealing with these so-called heroes is just as brutal as they are, and his hatred isn't limited to Homelander. He's got it out for all of them. He kills any Supe he can get his hands on, threatens tons of others, and he is even willing to kill a baby and let hundreds of people to die just to spit in Homelander's face. And he isn't just cruel to his enemies, though. He treats his own team like shit, too. Right from the start, he sees Huey, Frenchie, and even Kimiko as mere pawns in his game. He constantly manipulates them with half-truths and sometimes outright lies, putting their lives on the line. Yet he always finds a way to justify himself. He hides his violent impulses and thirst for vengeance behind that fighting for the greater good narrative. At this point, it's like Butcher's inner darkness is fueled only by the desire of avenging his wife. I mean, it's almost too simple, too cliché. But as the story goes on, we see there's way more to it. When he visits his dying father at the end of season 2, we get so much context for why Butcher is the way that he is. And honestly, I think it's one of the best additions the show made to his character. Through that visit and some flashbacks later on, we learn that Butcher's father was an abusive man who constantly beat him and his brother Lenny. For him, being a tough guy meant being ruthless, and he saw the world as this brutal place where you either sink or swim. And in his twisted mind, being harsh with them was the only way to prepare them. Billy was able to show resistance and learn to swim, just as his father wanted. But his brother Lenny wasn't so lucky. After Billy left home, Lenny couldn't take his father's abuse and tragically ended his own life. Billy may have saved himself, yes, but the guilt of leaving Lenny behind weighed heavy on him. And that guilt turned into a hatred for his father, festering deep inside. Still, no matter what the outcome, his father wasn't entirely wrong. The world was indeed a brutal place, and as Butcher saw that reality more and more, his hatred grew stronger. Because it's always the strong preying on the weak, and just like his father, they never seemed to pay the price. And once again, the life decided to teach him its lessons the hard way. Losing his brother was bad enough, but years later he lost his wife to another bully, Homelander. And that's when Butcher really started to losing it. The abyss had always been there, he had always been staring into that deep darkness, but now he finally let himself fall in. At this point, I think the show did an incredible job fleshing out Butcher's character. But at the same time, it hit us with another moral question. In a world this messed up and cruel, can you really blame someone for turning into a monster? In the case of Butcher, I think the answer is clear. It all goes back to his father. By going after Homelander, he's not just seeking revenge for his wife, but he's also confronting the bully who turned him into the bitter man he is today. And for him, fighting back as brutally as they do is the only way to stand up and prove that he won't be a victim anymore. And the tragic part is that Butcher's methods of confronting Homelander mirror the twisted logic of his abusive father. Even though Butcher rejects his father's methods consciously deep down, he internalized them. To fighting monsters, you have to become one of them. That's exactly why he took Temp Wee, but as he admitted, he hated every second of it. He knew he'd crossed the line once again, but everything he's been through has already etched that twisted lesson into his soul. And if you look closely, you'll notice that after meeting his father, Butcher starts to see how much he and Homelander have in common. And this realization hits him even harder after talking to Vogelbaum and learning that just like himself, also Homelander had a tough childhood. But still, Butcher has never been as vile as Homelander. And maybe he never could because the people in his life always kept him from going completely off the rails. Because unlike Homelander, who was completely under Vought's control, Butcher had his loving brother, then his wife, and even Huey, his canary, as MM would say. Butcher may have lost his brother and wife, yes, but Huey's still there, a reminder of the brother he couldn't save. That's probably why, no matter how cold and ruthless he can be, he's always had this instinct to protect Huey. Remember the scene where Butcher and Soldier Boy caught Homelander? He wanted Huey to run away to keep him safe. And even before that, when Homelander saw Starlight and Huey together, he risked his own life to distract him. I mean, we all know that Butcher is that cold and ruthless asshole, even the boys would tell you that. But we also know that deep down, there's some humanity in him. Otherwise, who else would go out of their way to protect Ryan? After all, he's Homelander's son, and he's also the one who caused Becca's death, yet Butcher is out there to protect him. Sure, it was a promise he made to his wife, but that's not the whole story. Butcher knows what it's like to grow up without any love, surrounded by nothing but abuse, and he doesn't want Ryan to go through the same hell he did. That's exactly why he wants to keep him away from Homelander. Now don't get me wrong, Butcher's not trying to play hero here. He's crossed that line long ago. He knows that his own traumas have scarred him for life, but if there's one thing he can do right, one chance to break the cycle, he wants to take it. So, if Butcher hadn't been through all that, would he still be the same? Would anything be different if he hadn't stared into that abyss? It's hard to know. But when you look at the characters like Butcher, Homelander, and even MM, you'll actually see that their traumatic pasts and messed up childhoods have shaped who they are. Maybe that's what the boy's really trying to tell us. Monsters aren't born, they're made. For me, Butcher could have been a completely different person if he'd grown up in a different environment, but the life just kept pushing him down this dark road, and he became this hateful man who trapped in a cycle of violence. And the saddest part is that his hatred runs so deep that even if he gets his revenge, even if he kills Homelander and finally cools down, he will never truly heal. At the end of his story, the number of monsters remains unchanged. So if you've made it this far, thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed the video, I'd really appreciate if you could leave a comment, give a like, and click to subscribe. Your support will greatly help the mysterious algorithm notices me. And if you want to support me personally, you can join the channel by using the join button. See you next time.